Hello music people! This video is about drum setup. I have seen a number of drummers who have been playing for years and are amazing players, but for one reason or another, they actually don't know how to properly set up all the components of a drum set. And so what I'm going to do is address some common issues that I have found with drummers setting up drums. The snare drum is one of the most important parts of a drum set, and yet the snare drum stand is one of the most common pieces of equipment that drummers don't set up properly. I'm just going to take this snare drum off of the stand and give you a good close look at all of the adjustments that need to be made properly to a snare drum stand. Here we have an adjustment for the width of the legs. This adjusts the height of the snare drum. This adjusts the angle of the snare drum so you could tilt it. And this adjusts the basket of the snare drum. The basket is what holds the snare drum in place. And so it makes it wider and narrower. And it's actually this right here that is the most common thing that drummers don't seem to quite know how to adjust properly. So if I put my snare drum on here and just leave it, well, the snare drum really isn't on here very securely. And when you go to pick up the snare drum to move it or something, you would probably grab it like this, pick it up, and the snare stand isn't attached. And it's really annoying when that is the case. And the basket really is intended to tightly grip the snare drum so that it stays in place. That is how you set up a snare drum stand. There's no reason not to set it up like that. But the thing that is kind of confusing, and you probably saw this earlier, this is generally true for cymbal stands and other pieces of drum hardware, is that you always turn counterclockwise to loosen and clockwise to tighten, or righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, right? But when it comes to the basket, it's actually opposite because when you turn this, you're actually turning it and it's moving up this way. So that's why you actually have to turn it counterclockwise when you're looking down on it, which is normally your angle that you're viewing it from when you're adjusting. You actually need to turn it this way. And now these three arms of the basket are firmly gripping the drum, so I can pick it up and I don't have to worry about the drum being insecure as I am playing. So, there you have it, a snare drum stand. A drum stool is another part of a drum set that I commonly see set up improperly. It is also a part of an instrument that I think people underestimate the importance of adjusting. If you're a drummer in a situation where you're playing a shared drum set, what you might do is you might sit down at the stool and you might realize that most of the parts of the drum set are either too high or too low, and really, instead of adjusting each drum and each cymbal to the height that you prefer, you may only have to make one adjustment, and that is to the drum stool. Most of the changes that one drummer has to make from one to the next has to do with their height. And in the same way as people of different heights need to adjust the height of their bicycle seat on their bicycle, drummers need to adjust the height of their drum stool. And so, how do you do that? Well, I'll show you. The highest knob that you see for adjusting a drum stool actually relates to the drum stool itself coming on or off. So if you want the ability to have your drum stool spin while you're sitting on it, then you can leave it loose. If you want to have it be stationary and not spinning, then you would tighten it. And you'll want to make sure that you tighten it enough if that's what you want to do. In terms of how the height is adjusted on a drum stool, there's two different types of drum stools. This one is one where you adjust the height by spinning. What you do is you loosen this and you spin it. And it slowly raises up higher and higher. Once it's high enough, then you turn this and it is solid. And I can turn this as well to make sure it's not spinning, and it's totally good. If you want additional support to make sure that it's not going to lower and come down on you, then there's a locking mechanism here that you can loosen using a drum key, and you would move down to this region and tighten it, and then that way you've got this mechanism keeping it tight, and you've got this locking nut keeping it tight. So that's one kind of drum stool. Here's another kind of drum stool where the height is adjusted not by spinning, but just by loosening and moving up and down. So that's another type of drum stool. And again, I've got an adjustment up here where if I tighten it, I can make sure that it doesn't spin. So there you go, drum stools. The feet of the kick drum are also really important to set up properly so that your kick drum doesn't run away from you while you're playing. It's super annoying, and I've seen a lot of drummers not get this right. They'll end up trying to put heavy things in front of their kick drum to prevent this problem, when meanwhile they just haven't set up the feet properly. You want to make sure that the 2 feet of the kick drum are extended appropriately, that they're symmetrical, that this is tightened, and that is tightened enough. If your drum is on carpet, like this one is, you will want to make sure that you have the rubber foot turned in such a way that it reveals the metal pick that kind of sticks out at the bottom, so that it sort of picks into the carpet and stays. However, if you are set up on hardwood floor, you will want to turn this in the opposite direction so that that metal pick is covered and that it's rubber that's hitting the floor. And as one last general reminder, you will want to make sure that every single component of each piece of hardware holding up your cymbals and your drums is tightened. So, I hope this video has been helpful, and I will see you next time.